I never thought I'd be the kind of person who needed saving, especially not in the middle of the night, and definitely not by someone I'd only known for 3 weeks. But there I was, 22 years old, trying to make it through my first summer working at a national park in Colorado, sharing a tiny cabin with a guy named Marcus, who somehow knew exactly what I needed before I even knew myself. The nightmares started when I was 17. My therapist back home called it unprocessed trauma from the accident, from watching my older brother almost die in front of me. She said the dreams would fade with time and proper treatment, but 5 years later, they were still there, waiting for me every time I closed my eyes. Most nights, I could push through them, wake up sweating and disoriented but quiet, handle it alone like I'd learned to do. But some nights were worse than others, and that first week sharing a room with Marcus, I realized I couldn't hide it anymore. The Park Service had assigned us together randomly. He was from Oregon, studying environmental science, with this quiet confidence that made him seem older than 24. Dark hair that was always slightly messy, broad shoulders from years of hiking and rock climbing, and these incredibly gentle brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. We'd established an easy roommate dynamic those first few days, the kind where you respect each other's space, share the coffee maker without drama, and don't ask too many personal questions. That all changed on night 8. I remember the dream so clearly. My brother's car spinning on black ice, the sickening crunch of metal, the way time seemed to stop and accelerate simultaneously. In the dream, I'm always frozen, unable to move or scream or help, just watching it happen over and over. I woke up gasping, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight through the window, and I was drenched in sweat, my sheets twisted around me like ropes. That's when I heard Marcus's voice, low and steady from the bunk below mine. "Hey, you're okay. You're in Colorado. You're safe." I froze, humiliation flooding through me hotter than the panic. He was awake. He'd heard me. I wanted to pretend I was still asleep, but my breathing was too ragged, too obvious. "I'm sorry," I managed to whisper, my voice shaking. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," he said simply. There was no irritation in his tone, no judgment, just a calm steadiness that somehow made my racing heart slow down a fraction. I was already awake, reading. I could hear the lie in his voice, the kindness of it. The cabin was too dark for reading, and I definitely heard him breathing in sleep before I'd started thrashing. But I was grateful for the fiction, for the way it gave me an out. "Oh," I said weakly. "Okay." Silence settled between us, but it wasn't comfortable. I lay there staring at the wooden slats of my bunk, trying to control my breathing, trying to push the images away. My hands were still trembling. Then Marcus spoke again, and what he said surprised me. "Did you know that the park has over 300 miles of hiking trails, but only about 50 miles of them actually get regular foot traffic? I've been thinking about the trails nobody uses, wondering what they look like, if they're overgrown, or if nature just maintains them somehow without human interference." I blinked in the darkness, confused by the sudden topic change. "What?" "The forgotten trails," he continued, his voice still that same steady tone. "I was thinking about them before you woke up, wondering if we could get permission to explore some of them this summer, document what we find." Slowly, I realized what he was doing. He wasn't asking me about the nightmare, wasn't demanding an explanation or offering empty platitudes. He was just talking, giving me something else to focus on, a lifeline out of my own head. "That sounds like a lot of hiking," I said, my voice still rough, but steadier now. "Yeah, well, that's kind of the point of working at a national park," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Plus, I figure if we're going to spend all summer in this tiny cabin together, we should probably tire ourselves out during the day. Better sleep that way." It was such a casual comment, but the implication was clear. He knew the nightmares would probably happen again. He was already planning for it, normalizing it, making it just another thing we'd deal with together. We talked for another 20 minutes that night, Marcus describing trails he wanted to explore, asking my opinion on which peaks looked most interesting from our cabin window, telling me about a family of marmots he'd seen near the visitor center. By the time silence fell again, my heartbeat had returned to normal, and the dream's grip on me had loosened. I fell back asleep to the sound of his breathing below me, steady and reassuring. 3 nights later, it happened again. This time, I woke up with tears on my face, biting my lip to keep from crying out. And once again, Marcus's voice came through the darkness. "Hey, still in Colorado, still safe." A pause, then, "I've been thinking about something. Why do you think humans are so drawn to mountains? Like, evolutionarily, we should probably prefer valleys, right? Easier living, more resources, but we keep climbing up." And just like that, we were talking again. About mountains and human nature and why we push ourselves toward difficult things. He told me about climbing Mount Hood when he was 19, how terrified he'd been, but how alive he'd felt at the summit. I found myself sharing things I hadn't planned to, about how small I felt sometimes, how the vastness of the park was both comforting and overwhelming. This became our pattern. Every few nights, the nightmares would come. Every time, Marcus was there, never asking about them directly, just offering his voice in the darkness, talking about anything and everything until I could breathe again. He talked about his childhood in Portland, his complicated relationship with his father, the first time he realized he was attracted to other guys, and how terrified he'd been to admit it. He talked about books he loved, trails he'd hiked, dreams he had for the future. And slowly, I started talking too. Not about the nightmares at first, but about other things. My own coming out story, messy and painful and still unresolved with my parents. My brother, the complicated mix of love and guilt and fear I felt about him. My uncertainty about what I wanted from life, how I'd taken this park job partly to run away from decisions I didn't want to make. By week 3, something had shifted between us. During the day, we'd started hiking together, our conversations continuing on the trails. Marcus had this way of looking at things, really seeing them, that made me pay attention differently. He'd stop to examine a wildflower or watch a hawk circling overhead, and suddenly I was seeing it too, really seeing it, not just passing by. One evening, after a particularly long hike, we sat outside our cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Marcus was quiet beside me, and I realized he'd been quieter than usual all day. "You okay?" I asked. He glanced at me, something uncertain in his expression. "Can I ask you something? You don't have to answer if you don't want to." My chest tightened, knowing what was coming. "Okay." "The nightmares," he said carefully. "How long have you had them?" I should have felt exposed, vulnerable, but sitting there with him after weeks of his gentle presence in my darkest moments, it felt more like relief, like I'd been waiting for permission to share this weight. 5 years, I said quietly. "Since the accident, my brother, I took a breath. "He almost died. Car accident on an icy road. I was following behind him in my own car, saw the whole thing happen. Sometimes I still see it when I close my eyes." Marcus didn't say anything right away, just nodded slowly. Then, "Is he okay now, your brother?" "Yeah. Physically, he's fine. We don't really talk much anymore, though. I think he knows I feel guilty, like I should have been able to prevent it somehow, even though that's irrational. It's easier for both of us if we keep our distance." "That sounds lonely," Marcus said softly. It was such a simple observation, but it hit me hard. "Yeah," I admitted, "it really is." He reached over then, his hand covering mine on the wooden bench between us. The touch was warm, solid, grounding. "I'm glad you're here," he said. "In Colorado, I mean, at the park, in that cabin with me." My heart did something complicated in my chest. "Me too," I whispered. That night, I didn't have a nightmare. I lay in my bunk, listening to Marcus breathe below me, thinking about his hand on mine, about the way he'd been showing up for me night after night without asking for anything in return. Thinking about how I'd started looking forward to our morning coffees together, how his laugh made something warm bloom in my chest, how I'd catch myself watching him on the trails, admiring the way he moved through the world with such quiet purpose. I was falling for him, maybe had been for weeks. The realization was both terrifying and inevitable. 2 nights later, the nightmares came back with a vengeance. I woke up actually crying this time, a sob catching in my throat. Marcus's voice came immediately, but instead of starting a conversation from his bunk, I heard him moving, and then his face appeared at the edge of my bunk, illuminated by the moonlight. "Hey," he said gently, "can I come up?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He climbed up carefully, the narrow bunk barely big enough for one person, let alone two. But he settled beside me, his back against the wall, and without hesitation, I turned into him, pressing my face against his shoulder. "It was bad tonight," I managed to say. "I know," he murmured, his arm coming around me, holding me close. "I've got you." We stayed like that for a long time, his hand moving in slow circles on my back, his steady heartbeat under my ear. Eventually, I started talking, really talking, telling him about the accident in detail for the first time, about the guilt and the fear and the way it had changed me, about how I'd been so afraid to let anyone close because I couldn't bear the thought of watching someone else I cared about get hurt. "That's not really living, though," Marcus said quietly when I finished. "Being so afraid of loss that you never let yourself have anything." "I know," I whispered, "but I don't know how to stop being afraid." He was quiet for a moment, then, "What if we practiced, you and me? What if we just tried being here together, in this moment, not worrying about what might happen tomorrow, or next month, or next year?" I pulled back enough to look at him, our faces inches apart in the darkness. "Is that what this is? What we're doing?" "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know I think about you constantly. I know I listen for your breathing at night to make sure you're okay. I know that when you smile at something on our hikes, it's the best part of my day." He paused, then added softly, "I know I'm falling for you, and that terrifies me too, but I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions." My breath caught. "Marcus, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. Whatever happens, wherever this goes, I'm here. Through the nightmares, through the hard days, all of it." Instead of answering with words, I closed the small distance between us and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, both of us testing this new territory. His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away the last traces of tears on my cheek, and the kiss deepened, becoming something more certain, more real. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless for an entirely different reason. "I'm falling for you too," I whispered. "I have been for weeks. I was just too scared to admit it." He smiled, and even in the darkness, I could see the joy in his expression. "So, we're both terrified?" "Absolutely," I said, and we both laughed quietly. He stayed in my bunk that night. The two of us squeezed together in a space meant for one, but neither of us minded. I fell asleep with his arms around me, feeling safer than I had in 5 years. The nightmares didn't stop completely after that. Trauma doesn't work that way, doesn't just disappear because you found someone who cares about you, but they became more manageable, less overwhelming, because I wasn't facing them alone anymore. Marcus was always there, awake or waking, ready to talk me through it, ready to hold me until the fear passed. We spent the rest of that summer exploring the forgotten trails, documenting wildflowers and wildlife, falling more deeply in love with each other and with the mountains around us. We learned each other's rhythms, our fears, and hopes, and dreams. On our days off, we'd pack supplies and hike to remote spots where we could be alone together, talking for hours, or sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence, watching the world go by. Near the end of summer, on a particularly clear night, we hiked up to a ridge overlooking the valley. The stars were incredible, the Milky Way a bright river across the sky. We lay on our backs on a flat rock, Marcus's hand in mine, and I felt something shift inside me, something that had been tight and afraid for so long, finally loosening. "I called my brother yesterday," I said quietly. Marcus turned his head to look at me. "Yeah? How did it go?" "Hard, good. We talked for almost an hour, really talked, for the first time since the accident." I squeezed his hand. "I told him about the nightmares, about you, about how I'm trying to stop letting fear run my life." "I'm proud of you," Marcus said softly. "I'm proud of me too," I admitted. "And I have you to thank for that, for showing up, night after night, never asking me to be anything other than what I was." "That's what you do for people you love," he said simply. My heart stuttered. We hadn't said those words yet, had been dancing around them for weeks. "Love?" I whispered. He turned fully toward me, propping himself up on his elbow. "Yes, love, I love you. I think I have since that first night when I realized you were suffering, and all I wanted was to make it better somehow. I love you too, I said, the words feeling both momentous and natural. You saved me, you know, not from the nightmares, but from the isolation, from the belief that I had to handle everything alone. We saved each other, he corrected gently. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that showing up for someone, really showing up, is worth the risk of getting hurt. We kissed under those impossible stars, and I thought about all the nights ahead of us, the ones where I'd wake up afraid and he'd be there, steady and sure. The ones where maybe he'd need me the same way, and I'd get to be that presence for him. The nights of joy and discovery and simple companionship. Summer ended, as summers do, but Marcus and I didn't. We found an apartment together in Denver, enrolled in school, started building a life. The nightmares still come sometimes, but they're gentler now, less frequent. And when they do come, I wake up to find Marcus already awake beside me, his hand on my shoulder, his voice low and steady in the darkness, talking me through it, always talking me through it, reminding me where I am, who I am, that I'm safe and loved and not alone. He never asked me to explain or justify or fix myself. He just stayed awake, night after night, offering his presence and his words and his unwavering patience. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed. Not someone to save me from my demons, but someone willing to sit with me in the darkness until the light came back. Someone who saw me at my most vulnerable and chose to stay anyway. That's what love is, I've learned. Not the absence of fear or pain, but the presence of someone who stands beside you through it all, who talks you through the nightmares and celebrates the victories, who sees all of you and loves you anyway. Marcus gave me that gift, and every day I try to give it back to him, to be that steady presence in his life, the way he's been in mine. We still talk late into the night sometimes, lying in our shared bed in our Denver apartment, discussing everything and nothing. The forgotten trails we still want to explore, the dreams we're building together, the way love can surprise you when you least expect it. And sometimes, when the nightmares come, he's still there, still awake or waking, still offering that same steady voice in the darkness. Hey, you're okay. You're in Denver. You're safe. I'm here. And I am. We both are. Safe and found and home.